At precisely 5:17 a.m., my wife and I were jolted awake by a thunderous pounding at our front door, three sharp, aggressive knocks that didn't sound like any ordinary visitor. Before I could even sit up, I heard it, the unmistakable metallic click of a shotgun being racked just outside. Heart pounding, I crawled to the door and peered through the peephole. What I saw made my blood run cold. 6 men in full black tactical gear stood on our porch, rifles in hand, patches on their shoulders reading Community Enforcement Unit. And behind them, filming the whole thing on her iPhone like she was live-streaming a reality show, was Karen Witherspoon, our HOA president. She stood there with a smug grin, proud as could be, while these hired enforcers prepared to evict my family at gunpoint over a $148 fine for an unauthorized garden ornament. I know how that sounds. Believe me, if someone had told me this would happen 6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed them either. But here we were. We'd moved into this house hoping for peace. After years of service, me in military logistics, my wife in a branch of special operations the government still won't fully acknowledge, we bought this place outright. A 2,400 square foot ranch-style home nestled on 3 quiet acres, with a wide porch, mature trees, and enough space between neighbors to feel like we were truly free. It was supposed to be our sanctuary. Everything was perfect until we met Karen. Karen Witherspoon had been HOA president for 15 years, running Pine Hollow Estates like her personal fiefdom. Unopposed, unchallenged. She ruled with an iron grip, backed by a small circle of loyal followers who treated the HOA bylaws like sacred commandments. At first, it was little things. A warning notice because our American flag was too large, except it wasn't. It was a regulation 4 by 6 feet, same as half the neighborhood. A $75 fine because our daughter left her pink bicycle in the front yard for more than 3 hours. Then a cease and desist letter when my wife installed a porch swing. Apparently, it altered the exterior aesthetic without prior approval. We paid the first fine. We moved the bike. We even filled out the absurd 12-page application for the swing, complete with architectural renderings and material samples. But Karen wasn't interested in compliance. She smelled hesitation. And like all petty tyrants, she pushed harder. Within 3 months, we were drowning in citations. Then came the new amendment, passed in a special meeting we weren't told about, allowing the HOA to place liens on homes for unpaid fines over $100. That meant foreclosure, all without a court hearing. And wouldn't you know it? Notices were always misdelivered, slipped under the door when we were out of town, or sent to an old address. When we questioned it, Karen sent her personal lawyer, a nervous little man named Todd who looked like he still lived with his mom, to threaten us with lawsuits, liens, and eviction. And then, last week, she filed an urgent enforcement order with the HOA's private security contractor. That's how we ended up staring down 6 shotgun barrels at dawn over a $148 fine, plus $800 in late fees she tacked on just because she could. Most people would have panicked. Most would have begged. Most would have broken. But Karen picked the wrong family to mess with. Because while she stood there giggling behind her iPhone, my wife, the most patient woman I've ever known, was already calculating angles, sightlines, and entry points. And before the sun fully rose that morning, her little private army would be scrambling for their lives. Half of them cuffed and crying, the rest wishing they'd never left home. You see, there's a funny thing about power. When you abuse it against the wrong people, it has a way of snapping back, harder than you ever expected. And Karen was about to learn that lesson the hard way. When we first moved in, we made one big mistake. We thought we could just keep to ourselves and everything would be fine. Our property was at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, nearly 200 feet from the nearest neighbor. It felt like freedom. We were wrong. Karen didn't just want control. She needed it. She thrived on micromanaging every blade of grass, every paint chip, every minor infraction. Her kingdom wasn't built on fairness or community. It was built on paranoia, petty grudges, and a binder of rules so dense it would make a Soviet bureaucrat proud. The first letter came 2 weeks after we moved in. Asterisk, your mailbox is non-compliant with HOA Standard 147B. Approved colors are colonial white or pebble gray. Yours appears to be off-white. Fine. $1.50, asterisk. Off-white. It was the same color as half the mailboxes on the street. When we pointed that out, Karen's reply was cold and simple. Asterisk, those were grandfathered in. Yours was not. Asterisk, classic. We paid. We replaced the mailbox. Thought it was over. It wasn't. Next came the lawn height inspections. Grass over 3 inches? $75 fine. Didn't matter if it rained for 2 weeks or if you were at a family funeral. One Saturday morning, I caught Karen creeping across our yard with a tape measure. No clipboard, no warning, just a smug little smile. I leaned out the window and called, "Hey, Karen, looking for buried treasure?" She turned bright red, stormed off, and 3 days later, we got a $150 citation for verbal harassment of an HOA official during a compliance inspection. Oh, it was on. We tried to stay civil. We attended HOA meetings. We asked questions. But Karen didn't want dialogue, she wanted submission. At meetings, she'd gavel down any dissent, override objections, and ram through whatever rules she and her inner circle dreamed up. Question her authority? Suddenly, you get fined for improper parking or unauthorized exterior modifications, like planting tulips without written approval. I'm not joking. The more we resisted, the more aggressive she became. Then came the special assessment. At a shady meeting held on a weekday afternoon, when most homeowners were at work, Karen proposed a $500 fee per household for emergency neighborhood beautification. When people asked what exactly needed beautifying, she just smiled and said, "It's all in the Beautification Enhancement Directive, which will be distributed after the vote." Of course, it passed. Her crew outnumbered the rest of us 3-1. 3 weeks later, a brand new security building popped up by the community pool, along with a shiny black SUV labeled Pine Hollow Security Unit, fully funded by our beautification fees. And guess who ran the security company? Karen's nephew. A kid with no law enforcement experience, but plenty of tattoos and a weakness for tactical gear. From then on, things escalated fast. We started getting daily drive-bys. The SUV would roll past our house, slow to a crawl, windows down, the officers in mirrored sunglasses staring us down like we were criminals. One night, one of them parked across from our driveway for 2 solid hours, just watching. My wife, cool as ice, would wave and smile through the window. She wasn't intimidated, but the fines kept coming, faster and angrier. $50 for a garden flag with a sunflower. $100 for parking a recreational vehicle, our daughter's tricycle on the porch. $200 for unauthorized fence modifications because we repaired a section of split rail with identical materials. When we requested mediation, something guaranteed in the bylaws, Karen lost our paperwork. We hired a lawyer. That's when we learned the truth. Once your unpaid fines hit $100, the HOA could file a lien on your home. No court, no warning. It was a machine designed to break people down and take their property. And Karen wanted ours. We later found out she'd been eyeing our back lot for months, planning to sell it to a developer who wanted to build luxury condos. But she couldn't do it while we lived there. So she needed us gone. Fast. Hence the flood of fines. Hence the private army. Hence the 5 a.m. raid. What she didn't count on was my wife. She wasn't just a military retiree. She was a decorated Green Beret sniper, trained in psychological operations, fluent in surveillance and counter-surveillance. And after everything Karen had put us through, after they came to our door with guns and threats, she was done playing nice. While I handled the legal side, my wife quietly started gathering evidence. She recorded HOA meetings where Karen manipulated votes. She collected receipts showing HOA funds funneled to her nephew's security company. She documented every false citation, every forged inspection report. By the time the raid happened, we had a file thicker than a New York phone book. And we weren't alone. Turns out, dozens of neighbors, scared, bullied, or just fed up, had been keeping their own records. They just needed someone to stand up. Someone who wasn't afraid. Someone who knew how to fight back. And my wife. She was more than ready. You'd think after the failed raid, after my wife scared those goons so badly they practically tripped over their own boots retreating, Karen would back down. You'd be wrong. She doubled down. First, she plastered our names in the HOA newsletter. Certain residents had displayed hostile and dangerous behavior toward Pine Hollow security. We encourage all homeowners to remain vigilant and report suspicious activities. She even included a blurry photo of me mowing the lawn, wearing sunglasses and a ball cap. Apparently, that made me a threat. Then she weaponized the online portal. Suddenly, we were bombarded with anonymous complaints, children making disruptive noise, our 6-year-old laughing on the swing set, unauthorized exterior decorations, a seasonal wreath on our door, visible trash bins, neatly tucked behind a privacy fence. Every complaint came with a new fine. Every fine pushed us closer to foreclosure. Her goal was clear: break us. Make us leave on our own terms. But while she was busy playing dictator, my wife was preparing for war, not with bullets, but with evidence, legal filings, and precision. And then came her most despicable move. It started with our dog, Rusty. A sweet old golden retriever who wouldn't hurt a fly. One day he was bounding through the yard. The next he could barely stand. The vet confirmed it. Poisoning. Rat poison specifically. We were shattered. Rusty had been with us through deployments, moves, births, funerals. He was family. And someone had deliberately tried to kill him. The vet gave me a plastic evidence bag with the remains of a treat Rusty had found near the fence, laced with enough poison to kill a child. I sat at the kitchen table that night, staring at the bag, fists clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. That's when my wife said the words that changed everything. No more defense. We go on offense. We installed hidden cameras, real surveillance-grade equipment, not just doorbells. We wired the fence line, monitored the tree line, set up motion sensors disguised as birdhouses. It didn't take long. 3 nights later, we got the footage. Karen's nephew, the so-called security chief, sneaking into our yard in the dark, tossing poisoned treats over the fence.
Clear as day.
Caught red-handed. We called the sheriff. You'd think he'd storm in, arrest everyone, and shut the whole operation down. But this wasn't a movie. The sheriff said he needed to build a case. More evidence. More documentation. Be patient.
So we did.
And Karen? She wasn't done. She called another emergency meeting, scheduled for 2 p.m. on a weekday, of course, to propose new bylaws. Anyone under investigation for criminal behavior could have their HOA membership suspended. No trial. No appeal. No voting rights. No access to amenities. No property protections. In other words, she wanted the power to blacklist us legally. We found out just in time. Drove over, hearts racing, only to find Karen standing at the podium, gavel in hand, ready to make it official. She stood at the podium, beaming like she'd already won. The room was packed. Her loyalists filled the front rows, neighbors who nodded along with every word she said, who clapped at the right moments, who treated her like royalty. A few of the more level-headed residents sat scattered in the back, shifting uncomfortably in their folding chairs, exchanging quiet glances. When I tried to speak, Karen cut me off without even looking my way. Non-members may not address the board during disciplinary proceedings, she said sweetly, tapping her little gavel like it was a royal scepter. Never mind that we were fully paid members in good standing. Never mind that the so-called disciplinary proceedings were completely made up.
She called for a vote anyway.
Hands shot up like she was handing out free concert tickets. I looked around, at the downcast eyes, the forced smiles, the smug curve of Karen's lips, and felt a deep, simmering anger rise in my chest, one I hadn't felt since my days overseas. This wasn't about fines anymore. It wasn't about garden gnomes or mailbox colors. This was about power. About someone who'd been handed a tiny bit of authority and used it to intimidate, control, and punish because no one had ever said no. And if no one else was going to do it, it would have to be us. Back at home, my wife pulled out the file she'd been building for months. It was meticulous. A masterpiece of quiet, patient justice. Itemized lists showing how HOA funds had been misused, money funneled into private accounts, expenses with no receipts, payments for security services that never happened. Photos and videos of Karen's so-called security team, really just her nephew and a couple of buddies, trespassing on private property, filming people through their windows, leaving threatening notes. Emails, too. Oh, yes, we had the emails. Thanks to a few careless CCs, we had proof of Karen openly discussing how to target problem homeowners and make their lives miserable enough that they'd just leave. We even had signed affidavits from other neighbors, people who'd been fined for nonsense, threatened, bullied into silence. All of it compiled, organized, and backed up on 3 separate flash drives, just in case. And then there was the cherry on top. We discovered that the security building Karen had erected, the one with the floodlights and the surveillance cameras, had been built without any county permits. It was, by law, an illegal structure, subject to immediate demolition. It was almost too perfect, but we weren't going to rush in. As tempting as it was to storm the next meeting and drop the whole file on the table, my wife had a better plan. We weren't going to fight Karen in whispers or legal filings. We weren't going to settle for quiet revenge. We were going to expose her, publicly, completely, spectacularly. And she was going to watch it happen. They say the best revenge is living well. I say the best revenge is public accountability, preferably with an audience large enough that the story gets passed around at barbecues and bridge clubs for the next 30 years. And that's exactly what we had planned for Karen Witherspoon. It all came down to the next town council meeting. The HOA might have been Karen's personal fiefdom, but the town council answered to voters and to the law. Karen had gotten sloppy. Too many illegal fines. Too much money disappearing. Too many neighbors afraid to speak up. But fear only lasts so long. And now, the tide was turning. The meeting was held at the local rec center, a squat brick building with faded banners and fluorescent lights that buzzed just enough to make your head ache. The perfect setting for a showdown. We got there early. I wore my best jeans and my Lucky Ball cap. My wife wore a plain black jacket. Nothing flashy, just business. Karen, of course, arrived in a neon pink pantsuit, flanked by her loyal followers like a reality TV star making an entrance. She swept into the room like she owned it, waving and smiling like she was running for mayor. Her nephew, yes, the same one caught on camera tossing poison-laced treats over our fence, wore a fake earpiece like he was part of the Secret Service. I swear, you couldn't make this stuff up. The meeting started with the usual town business, zoning updates, budget reports, a new playground initiative. People shuffled papers, coughed into their hands, tried not to fall asleep. Then came the public comment section. That's when my wife stood up, walked calmly to the microphone, and unleashed everything. She laid it all out, clear, calm, and devastating. The unpermitted security building, the misuse of HOA funds, the pattern of harassment, fake fines, selective rule enforcement, intimidation. Every claim backed by printed documents, screenshots, video footage. She even played the clip of Karen's nephew throwing poison treats over our fence, treats meant for our dog, Rusty, who nearly died. The room went completely silent. Karen tried to interrupt, waving her arms, shouting about defamation and fake news. But the council chairwoman, a no-nonsense woman named Margaret with a haircut so sharp it could cut glass, raised one eyebrow and shut her down. "You'll have your turn," she said, her voice like a gavel. "Right now, Mrs. Witherspoon has the floor." Then came the recording. During one of Karen's secret HOA meetings, one she never officially announced, she'd let her guard down. And on that day, she'd spoken plainly about her plan to drive out the people she didn't like. My wife played the audio, and Karen's voice filled the room. Asterisk, if we find them enough, harass them enough, make them miserable enough they'll sell, then we can bring in better people. The right kind of people. Asterisk. The gasp that swept through the room was almost musical. Even some of Karen's staunchest supporters looked like they wanted to vanish into their chairs. Karen turned 3 shades of purple. She stammered, denied, blamed her nephew, claimed he acted without her knowledge. But it was too late. The sheriff had quietly entered the room halfway through the presentation. And he wasn't alone. He had a warrant. One of Karen's followers tried to block the door. It didn't end well for him. Within minutes, Karen was in handcuffs. So was her nephew. So was Todd, her slimy lawyer, who turned out to have his own hands deep in the HOA's finances. The applause that erupted when they were let out was deafening. Neighbors who'd never spoken to us before were clapping, cheering, even offering high fives. Old Mrs. Dobbins from 3 houses down actually cried real tears and hugged my wife so hard I thought she might pop a rib. It wasn't just a victory. It was a release, a cleansing of years of fear, resentment, and quiet suffering. And it felt damn good. The fallout took time, of course. Karen faced multiple charges: fraud, harassment, misuse of funds, conspiracy. The HOA board dissolved within a month. The illegal security operation folded overnight. A new interim board was elected, real neighbors, not Karen's cronies, and they immediately voided all the bogus fines, canceled the illegal liens, and voted to demolish the unpermitted security building. You better believe my wife and I showed up with lawn chairs and popcorn the day the bulldozer arrived. Best $10 I ever spent. Rusty made a full recovery, by the way. It took months of careful treatment, but he pulled through. Now he gets extra treats, non-poisonous ones, every single day. And our daughter? She still rides her pink bicycle up and down the street, no complaints, no measuring sticks, no HOA brown shirts hiding in the bushes. Just peace. Real peace. The kind we fought for and won. You'd think being marched out of a town hall in handcuffs would be enough to teach Karen a lesson. You'd be wrong. 2 weeks after her arrest, as the dust began to settle and the new board worked to untangle her mess, Karen filed a civil lawsuit from jail. She claimed we had defamed her, caused her emotional distress, and conspired to remove her from power for personal gain. Yes, the woman who poisoned our dog, tried to seize our home, and ran a private HOA militia, was now accusing us of bullying her. The nerve. At first, I'll admit, I was worried. Lawsuits, even ridiculous ones, can drain you. Time, money, energy. That's exactly what Karen was counting on. But my wife just smiled. That calm, slightly terrifying smile that still makes me sit up straighter.
Let her come, she said.
We're ready. And boy, were we.